This is something that people don't really think about when they're just tinkering with home miners and duct taping and 3D printing stuff into their HVAC ducts. Unfortunately, your grandmother will never do that, so we need to talk about how this scales and all the check marks we have to check off in the regulatory landscape. So I'm going to hand it off to Colin here as our MC, and we'll get into it.
Well, hello. So before I get started, I guess later you can go to this poll.denver.space and use this hashtag adoption. And if you type in questions, I guess I'll be seeing them here and I can ask them. But to get started, this is about adoption of these cool heating units, right? I'm Colin Crossman. My background, I'm an attorney and a biomedical engineer, and I work for the state of Wyoming, and I will just pass it along.
My name is Dylan. I'm just some guy. No, I'm the CFO here at the space, and my fiat mining job is a structural engineer.
Hi, I'm Rachel Nixon. I'm with IMA, which is a full-service commercial insurance brokerage firm.
And I'm Mike Toflius, and I'm with Long Building Technologies. We're a manufacturer's representative of HVAC equipment here in Colorado and across the West.
Okay, so one of the interesting things about we've all been thinking about these the miners as heating units, and we tinker with them. I've done it myself. I used it to heat my house 2 winters ago in Wyoming when it got to negative 40. But as some of us might realize, there's a difference between tinkering in something and building it in your own house and deploying it commercially. For instance, unless you are Coinbase, you're not going to take some idiot's code and that breaks every time the price goes. Oh, wait. Okay, so you shouldn't do that. And similarly, taking a cool idea, an idea that we're all using or all capable of doing, and pushing that out to the stream of commerce, that is a bigger deal than a lot of us might realize. Legally, from an engineering perspective, from an insurance perspective. So I guess the first question for the panel is, at a higher level, what are the snags that we have not yet started to cross?
I could go first. One thing that comes to mind for me in the commercial HVAC industry, is anybody familiar with ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Ventilation? So ASHRAE writes a lot of the standards in the HVAC industry, and one of those standards is 90.1, 90.2. Is anybody familiar with that standard? So that's an energy standard, and the DOE recognizes that as the minimum amount of energy that should be consumed in commercial buildings. And excuse me. So different jurisdictions and towns adopt their different revisions of ASHRAE 90.1. So the most progressive, is 22, but maybe smaller municipalities adopt like 2016, and the requirements aren't as stringent. And this is everything from like insulation to the equipment that you're installing in the space. So in the more, electrification is a big buzzword, right? And a lot of that pertains to going towards heat pumps, not necessarily electric resistant heat. So when you look at an electric resistant heater, the COP is close to 1 if it's 100% efficient. So 1 unit of energy in, you get 1 unit of heat out. The beauty of heat pumps is for that same amount of energy in, you can get maybe 3 or 4 or even 5 units of heat out. So I think from the whole point of 91 is to minimize your energy consumption. So if you're looking to use an electric resistant type heating system as your primary source of heat, that might conflict with paths of compliance with 90.1 in certain areas or jurisdictions. So that's just something to consider. And I think a lot of it, we've been hammering it all day. A lot of that comes back to education and getting design engineers involved. They're the code experts. They navigate the building code and the energy codes to make sure that our buildings are in compliance. So Education of that group, of those engineers, I think will be huge for overcoming the hurdle of adoption in the commercial space.
Something else we haven't talked about is like certifications and getting miners UL listed or Energy Starred, like more compliant with standards, like Mike was saying. I love to tinker as much as anyone else in this room. I think I've used every bit of my wife's patience with my tinkering, but like, if the miner isn't plug and play and it isn't insurable, which I'm sure Rachel can speak on, because it doesn't meet these certain standards and specifications, it's kind of a no-go. Like, we can all make a lot of noise and use our miners at home for heating, but it's not scalable if we can't insure it, or if something happens because of miner fault, and then you're extra screwed. So there's just capital down the drain. That's a big hurdle I see that we haven't talked about yet.
Thanks for that segue. Yeah, the problem with insurance is that it wants hundreds and hundreds of years of data. And like, we don't have that, right? It's like, this is a new and emerging industry, and as much as we all know how legitimate it is, and it isn't guys in hoodies hacking your grandma, like, there needs to be a sophistication and just additional data that come with time. So that's the challenge, I think, is that it's just like, we need more time, we need more people exposing the insurance markets that, hey, we're doing this, we're not bad actors, we're creating additional heat, or we're giving, power back to the grid. There's lots of good that can come from this. And I think just additional education for the carriers is what's needed. It's something we've been doing for the past 3 to 4 years, is saying, hey, this is really like a data center, or hey, this is just a piece of equipment. We don't need to be afraid of this. Let's continue to educate so that additional carriers will come online, which creates additional competition, and ultimately it will be good for everybody. But it's just such a process that we keep thinking things are getting closer and closer, and we're seeing more carriers come online and be accepting of the industry. But I think just the more we can continue to expose the industry to all the good that's coming will be helpful for everybody in the long run.
So let's say someone has designed one of these systems. It's a package system, can be installed in a residential unit. We're a little ahead of ourselves. We don't have UL. We don't have whatever other sort of professional or industry certifications, but we know they work. And let's say we can get an engineer to stamp a document saying it's safe, but we don't have the industry certifications. And we go and we put it in somebody's house. Now, the first thing that comes to my mind is, how do you get the town inspector to say this is cool? Let's say you don't even call the inspector, because that happens. What would happen in let's say the house burns down through a completely separate thing. Like, the miner doesn't have a fault, but let's say the house gets struck by lightning and burns down. What's going to happen to the homeowner? Are they going to have problems because they had this other thing that didn't have a certification in it?
I mean, my caveat is I'm not a homeowner's expert, but I would hope not. Like, if it's really not where the error comes from, it depends on the level of sophistication that the engineers can get to, right? To be able to tell, where did this error really come from? I will say that's probably even harder to get the carriers comfortable with. We're having trouble on the commercial side, right? Like, we're talking about our clients have, a bunch of miners, and do they want to have equipment break down on them? Do they want to have coverage for them? Some of them are like, wait, I can get insurance coverage for these miners? So I think it's hopefully going to be a trickle down, where if we can get commercial, comfortable with it, and on an industrial level, hopefully that'll continue to trickle down to the homeowner side, like you said, heating your house and other things that are hopefully coming from all of this, and the heat that can come from these miners to use additional warmth. But I think that's unfortunately probably a little further down the line than we would all like.
Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Canaan's new Avalon baseboard miner might be UL certified. So it's not like it's impossible. Just more research and market development, I guess, needs to be done kind of full board across all different machines. And so that chasm is slowly being breached, I think, but it's slow.
I believe some of the power supplies that are provided with the S9 and Antminer are UL listed. And there's some enclosures too, I believe, that are UL rated as an enclosure as well. I think, things you'd have to think about is if you're buying like an immersion setup, right? What fluid are you using? What codes and regulations are around that? If you're in a commercial space, if it's in your basement, I don't think anybody really cares that much. But if you're going into like a commercial building and you're buying an immersion setup and it has a heat exchanger in it, where's that heat exchanger being manufactured, and does it have the USA like ASME certifications for hydronic equipment?
We had in the industry, there was a immersion miner who had a big tank, and then there was a really cold freeze, similar to probably what we've had here recently. But what was interesting was that the loss was because an employee actually flipped a switch on the tank and turned off the fluid moving, and that's what caused the loss. It wasn't actually the fluid or like the fact that it was an immersion tank. So I think that that's an interesting thing we're going to have to work through too, is like that's probably really what we would call like an errors and omission on the employee side, not the issue with the immersion, but
Equipment,
who
yeah.
gets the bad rap. It's like, oh, well, that was an immersion tank, when really it was the people aspect.
No system is idiot-proof.
Yeah, that's on the commercial side. I think that you're absolutely right. I mean, stuff will happen there first and trickle down into the residential. But I think part of that is also because commercial insurance and commercial agents, are effectively, skilled actors, and you can often design your contracts to handle that or disclaim things. And whereas in a residential context, you're kind of limited by what the state lets you do in a lot of cases. So things are a little bit more complicated, actually, down in the residential side. And that's why sort of also what I was getting at with the inspectors, at least in something that I did back in the day, we installed a fairly complicated HVAC system in a hotel, and we had to browbeat the county inspectors to let us have it, and it required a lot of effort getting engineers' letters and proof from the manufacturers that these things are used, and it was just a water source heat pump. But that's the kind of thing I see, and that was a commercial build too, that I see where adoption is likely to be stalled out the hardest is with county inspectors saying, I don't want to approve this because I don't
Nobody
understand
wants
it.
to be first, right? The HVAC industry is pretty mature. It's been around a long time. A lot of the manufacturers in the space have been around for decades, right? Household names, and design engineers are conservative. For the most part, you might have a few that are installing, state-of-the-art VRF variable flow systems, but for the most part, they're using what's tried and true and has been used before. So, again, we've been talking about form factor and making something that can be plug and play, and being able to go and show an inspector or an engineer or a contractor, a manufacturing facility, hey, we have all these certifications. This is how we're building it. This is where we're doing it. It's not just being assembled in someone's garage. That will be huge for helping grow adoption into the next stage, I think.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say one thing we've tried to help our clients do in support of this is have engineers and loss control experts go out on our clients' sites, and they will inspect the facility, the miners, the engineering. These are all basically former engineers who are now serving in a loss control capacity, where they're like, how do we mitigate risk? How do we make this more safe so that there are less losses? And then hopefully that's good for the industry in the long run as well. It's like the less losses we have, the less bad press we get, the better for the industry. But that's our specialty, is like, how do we mitigate risk? Good old insurance, right? But how do we mitigate risk? How do we lessen that as much as possible? To hopefully ultimately be for the greater good of the ecosystem.
So Colin, I know you're the moderator, but I'm curious, was the inspector at all concerned about controls for your system? because like I know we've talked about this a lot today, and like none of these systems, unfortunately, are plug and play. And so that is a huge hurdle to adoption, in my opinion, is the fact that we can tinker with Home Assistant and try to control these systems as much as possible, but ultimately it's all closed source stuff, and we're reverse engineering and trying to make systems that work and are safe and control losses. But it's kind of like shooting in the dark and trying and iterating with no help from the manufacturer. It's like, here it is, make it work. Screw you. And so, I don't mean to take this from you.
No.
So I think that's another thing. In addition to specifications and getting technicians on board with knowing these systems, is having a more open source kind of philosophy on these miners, and getting the controls kind of more dialed in. And so if there is a failure somewhere, the system shuts off, or you can kind of make it more plug and play approachable and just install and go and train your technicians, and insurance is happier, I would think.
Well, since you basically asked me the question, that was an interesting experience because we installed what was at the time, 2008, it wasn't a novel system. This has been used all over the world, but it was novel in our jurisdiction in Durham, North Carolina, and they hadn't seen it before. So we got them to accept it under the guise of, let us do it and we'll prove that it works. The building is basically non-combustible. It's this 18-inch thick solid brick with steel girders. I mean, it was you could put cannon on this thing and be fine. So if anything goes wrong, everybody will be fine. Everybody will be safe. So let us do this. And we convinced the inspectors that this would be a nice test bed to show this technology here, even though it's been used for decades in other places. A second project I did in the next county over actually used variable refrigerant flow, and it was the first one in North Carolina, I think, that did it. But both cases, it was us and the engineers we had hired who were used to building. The building that we were talking about is 25,000 square feet, and they were used to building like 250,000 square foot and larger stuff. Like, we were tiny. So they were good to walk the inspectors through and help them understand. And I think in the first case we had to actually have them talk to our insurance company too, because it was a hotel insurance company that had no idea what this was. So we had to have the engineers who were at the cutting edge of all this actually educate and train the inspectors and the insurance company to let us do it. And it turned out to be a whole lot more efficient. And so similarly, I think that is one of the paths here is you find a jurisdiction somewhere in Colorado. If the one here is not going to let you do it, go a county over or 2 counties over and find one that'll do it, and then come back to the jurisdiction you want to do it in and say, hey, they did it over there. You going to let them beat you? So I guess the next question is, so now we've talked about the high level sort of listings and things, and then the inspectors. How do you find the installers and the engineers to get to that point where to get to your 0 to 1 moment in your state, or at least or in your jurisdiction?
Incentives. We spoke about it earlier this morning, but I think a cool business opportunity is splitting your hash rate. I can say, I'll come to you with a heating proposition with miners. I'll give it to you for free. I want half your hash rate. I'm now incentivized as a technician to make sure that system is running smoothly. There's no issues. I can monitor it remotely. I'm like, hash rate dipped. I have a technician coming out to service it, see what's going on. All you pay for is the cost to run. I get money back. You get money. Everyone's happy. Incentives line. And I mean, that's the low-hanging fruit, in my opinion. I'm sure Mike can speak a little more to this. Like, it's got to be very difficult to just train technicians. One, you have to orange pill them, explain what this is, and then 2, explain like, here's this weird form factor. It might change in 4 years. Here you go.
Yeah, I mean, there's some, savvy installers and technicians out there, and, from installing, I'm not too worried about that. I think that'll be the easy part, getting, people on board with installing it. Plumbers can run pipe to it, electricians can run power to it. People are working on software that will make the UI much easier and more plug and play. But I think it's getting the design engineers on board and understanding this and where it fits in and makes the most sense. Anywhere that you don't have gas and you have to use an electric boiler makes a ton of sense, whether that's snow melt we've talked about earlier, or on a water source heat pump system where you have a boiler and a cooling tower and you need to keep that loop within a certain range. You can throw some miners in the basement and use the heat from that. So, those are great applications, and that really comes down to the design engineers stamping those drawings. So they have to get comfortable with it and on board, and then hopefully you find ones that have good relationships with your local jurisdiction or inspector.
Okay. Well, let's see. What's the next thing I can ask you about here? How about? Okay. Well, actually, I think we've kind of covered everything I was going to cover. That was really fast. All right. So I guess. All right. Fine. Here's one. Maybe a little off the wall, but we talked about the high level. We've talked about the county regulator. You talked about your tradesman. How do you handle the ultimate regulator and convincing the most important regulator, which would be your partner or spouse, to take the leap on something like this? And maybe this is the wrong question for this panel, but I don't know. I mean, it's one of the questions that was asked, so I'm going to this thing.
I've traded every favor with my wife. Anytime an S9 ramps up at home, I'm like, I'm so sorry. Ultimately, I just show her, like, our heat cost is the same, and we're getting a rebate, so it's a win-win. I work on making it less loud. Dane's system in the back, immersion mining, is sweet and it's silent, and like that's got the ultimate wife approval factor, in my opinion. As long as it works, I think your partner will be happy. It's when it doesn't work and they're cold, or there's no hot water, or it's loud again, and then you're in trouble. So like, keep your furnace back up. Like personally, I run my furnace to do a duty cycle, then keep the temperature where I want it to be with my miners. And we've struck a happy balance.
Get her a nice Bitcoin heated hot tub that she can sit in. I think that'll do it. No, but yeah, the HVAC industry isn't very sexy, and nobody really thinks about it until it doesn't work, right? So as long as as long as it gets warmer when you turn the thermostat up and colder when you turn it down, I think that's fine.
It's about what they say about insurance. Everyone's like, no one wants to think about it until they need it, and then they really hope it works and that you have really great coverage in place. I've sold my husband on we're still early, so let's continue on that track.
If we're early on Bitcoin, we are in prehistoric times in home heating. It's really exciting because the market, it's only going to get better from here. If this is the current par for the course, I'm so excited for what's to come next.
Okay, I guess another question that just came to mind is, since we talked about using it in commercial environments, we've talked about using it in residential environments, we've talked about environmental heat, we've talked about water heat. You brought up the concept of the Bitcoin-powered spa or hot tub. That actually seems to me like one of the better products for this. What of those areas, what product would be the fastest to market and sort of best demonstration? For me, it seems like something like that, or domestic hot water, before you get to full-on HVAC, mostly because of the simplicity and cost part, but also because of the immediate, it's a hot tub. It's giving you money. It's paying you to relax. What do you think about that?
I think that'd be. I've thought about that quite a bit. I went to some spa up in Whistler. That I don't know if anybody's been there, but it's like a big outdoor spa where you pay like $60 and there's a ton of outdoor hot tubs and it's beautiful. And I was there and thinking that I was like, man, what is the energy bill on this place? If they were using Bitcoin miners to heat all the water, that'd be incredible, and that'd be a great way to get people really, interested in it. So I think that's a great use case as well. But I had another one, I lost it. I'll come back.
Home hot water heater, I think, has a big use case. Because, you have huge tanks in your closet. I know on-demand hot water heating is like becoming more prevalent, but if you can get a miner in there and at least preheat your water, or with the M64s, like those have great bathing temperature water outlet. You could reclaim a closet, reclaim some garage space. You're spending the electrons to heat your water. You're comfortable, and you're getting paid back with some rewards. So I think home hot water use is the next big use case for home mining.
I have a commercial one, so sorry, not home related, but we had a company that was using ethane as the byproduct and then was using that to then create beverage grade CO2. So it's like, hey, let's use all the products here, redeploy them in useful cases, and I thought that was one of the more interesting use cases I had seen out there.
I have a really stupid idea. I want an ASIC powered toaster oven. It's very impractical, but I think anywhere you have resistive heat, it should be a miner. Whether you run it for 10 minutes, I'm sure the capital to build it would be insane. But like something like a BitAxe form factor pieced together into a toaster oven, it's this stupid pipe dream that I can't get out of my mind.
Okay, well, we've been going about this for about 30 minutes now, so do we have any questions from the audience we can go to?
Well, I submitted this on the thing, but I was, for insurance, I was curious, let's say I'm a contractor and we install some sort of mining use case in someone's house. Is that going to affect my liability insurance? And follow-up question would be, if I'm the homeowner and I have my contractor install that in my house, how's that going to affect my property casualty?
Yeah, great question. I would say it probably will impact your rates. And I would say I would always like to inform the carriers what they're doing. Like we'll see policies all the time and we're like, this carrier doesn't know what they're on. You're rated like you're, I don't know, a computer chip or something. And we don't want a claim to be denied if there is a claim. And so we are in insurance, I know, but we're a little bit risk intolerant, and that we really want the carriers to know what we're doing, and you as a contractor for them to know, this is what I'm doing for my clients. Yes, I'm installing these. No, it's not scary. No, it's not horrible for the environment, et cetera. But this is what I'm doing, because then if let's say something does happen at one of your clients' houses, sites, and they come back to you and they say, hey, let's get your liability involved here. I'm having an issue. I would want your claim to be covered by insurance. And if they don't know that this is what you're doing as a contractor, they have the ability to deny the claim. And I would rather see them know what you're doing, maybe pay a little bit more in your insurance premium. There's a crypto tax, we call it, because, again, the industry is new. But if you're paying a little bit more in the premium in the short run, then the claim gets paid and covered. And that's where my risk tolerance would fall and would be my advice.
Even with engineering approval, if you have all the approvals in place, insurance would still be affected?
Insurance still at this stage has the crypto tax. And again, we're working on mitigating that as much as we can by doing education and talking to the carriers, talking to the marketplace, educating the ecosystem. But my guess is still in the short run, you're probably going to pay a little bit of a premium, as much as we all hate that so much because it seems ridiculous and totally unnecessary. At least in the short term, that's kind of what we're seeing is even with stamping and approval and legitimate operations and legitimate controls put in place, there still is a little bit of an upcharge, unfortunately.
Well, you first.
Me first? Okay. So I want to hear what you three have to say about Colin's kind of pitch for going to a jurisdiction that's more lenient. So I live in Wyoming where there are like little to no regulatory laws as far as building construction goes. So if a company like Nicholas of Constellation brought his system there and deployed like 150 units or something for a year, I mean, would an insurance company or these regulatory bodies look at something like that as a credible like installation and maybe, would this convince people to be able to do it elsewhere? Is that a realistic thing, or is this just kind of like, I don't know, I mean, is that a method that could be attempted to like get this stuff?
I think so. I love people who are willing to be first movers as much as like from a risk mitigation standpoint, it's like not a lot of people want to be, but someone's got to do it. And I know Wyoming's been very welcoming, if you will, to banks and custodians and other areas within the space. So for sure, I think the more positive use cases we can share to the rest of the ecosystem, you guys know what a small world this is and small, I keep saying ecosystem, but I really truly think that's what it is, then that's going to continue to spread and help everybody in the long run.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, I'm a structural engineer, so the International Building Code is my Bible. And that is only developed through people doing things and failing. So with like if Constellation came in and showed, hey, this is viable, this works, it's a starting point. And so it can be improved upon from there. And it takes someone going first and saying, here you go. And so having that research, that market research, if you will, gives someone else another starting point to be like, hey, this works, let's kind of tweak it a little bit and build up from there.
Before I go to the next question, I did want to say one experience that I did have is while I think that would work for the insurance companies and the engineers, putting a bunch of stuff out in Wyoming is not going to convince a Colorado inspector.
That's what.
Okay. I'm not entirely sure how you convince a Colorado inspector of anything, but in North Carolina we had a situation like back in the VRF. There was a VRF building that we could point them to in Virginia, and they said, we don't care, that's Virginia. They have different codes than we do, even though they're not. They're international. So, whatever.
This is a good question. I can follow up with you later about the insurance. The advocacy, I think, needs to happen more across the country because the government regulators and all different flavors need to hear from the whole body of developers like in this room to kind of let's move the needle a little bit forward in terms of the stuff these miners, most of them are all UL listed, I think, right? I mean, at some point, stuff that you're getting be installed in someone's house has been vetted, if you will. So anyway, I just follow.
I have a question regarding language. So I'll give you an example. Go have a customer and they say, call the power company, like, hey, I'm putting in some Bitcoin. I need an upgrade. And they're like, oh, hell no. We don't do that. And if I have the same customer call and say, hey, I'm going all electrical to heat my house. Like, oh, you kind soul.
Saving the planet.
Right? And so with insurance, if I was to say, hey, I'm operating a Bitcoin mine in my house, they're like, oh, hell no. But if I say, look, I'm moving to some responsible electric resistant heat, and I need some insurance to cover my heaters, where's the line there? I'm just kind of curious.
How many caveats do I need to give?
All of them.
Yeah, that's a good question because I totally hear you and I agree with you. Will the insurance company see it that way? I don't know, but I totally agree. It's like, you're not doing anything wrong. In fact, you're doing great things, really. But insurance is so slow. And that's what's so painful for us is that we're trying to educate and push like to the regulation comment, like I know the Texas Blockchain Council and Ohio, whatever their official name is, and I know others are doing a great job to continue to push this narrative out. And hopefully with our new administration, there will be more regulation in a good way and more just kind of legitimacy for the industry as a whole. But yeah, in the super short term, again, I would be very clear. This is what I'm doing. Rate me appropriately. Don't gouge me. I want to be covered if I have an issue.
I can tell you that in other contexts, that works until it doesn't. For instance, if you tell your bank you're running a data center and they find out that you're selling that you're mostly doing Bitcoin mining, and then they debank you in November. I do. I might. Yeah. So yeah, I think in the situation there is, yeah, it'll work until it doesn't. If they find out after the fact, they might just drop you. And in some circumstances, that may not be a big deal. If you're a corporation that could otherwise self-insure, you might be fine. If you're a homeowner, well, maybe you just had your loan called, or I mean, commercial, you could have your loan called too. Like there's lots of, I mean, you can't insure against that risk. I probably.
I said one more note before we wrap here. It's kind of gloomy. So like one bullish thing is right now the industry is very limited on access to chips based on manufacturers. They're just like, here you go. We're not going to build it for you. It's focused for how much terahash can we squeeze per joule. And companies like Proto, and I'm sure there will be more, who are going to give access to the tinkerers. Here's a control board. Here's a handful of chips. You're not relegated to a hash board and building a system around that. For tinkerers to get access to individual pieces and not just the whole machine and figure out a system around that, I'm so incredibly excited for what is going to come out of that. If you just have, like, because who here has a BitX? Anyone? So that's a lot. That's maybe one hash board worth of ASICs that have been pulled off. like that's not scalable. So if we can get access to individual chips, then who knows what can be built for heating, for different appliances, for different use cases. Like it's so incredibly exciting how early we are.
And if you want access to chips, I just found out that people are buying old M30S++s for $100. That's it, and that's 3 hash boards worth of. Now they're old generation, but still, you could play with those and you could turn those into heaters. We have about 6 minutes left. If there's about one, anybody else got a? All right.
So this is to the attorney, and my father's best friend for his entire life used to say, "Don't ever get into a pissing duel with discovery." And yet, in the recent past, we've had victories about, arbitrary and capricious. So when it comes to this insurance question, is there any level of the insurance companies have to prove that this is more dangerous than a traditional heater? In other words, why is it always on the sector? That seems arbitrary and capricious to me. So I know that's a.
Well, I'll give you the standard lawyer answer. It depends. First of all, arbitrary and capricious is a concept that applies between citizens and the government, not so much between citizens and other citizens. And insurance companies are effectively other citizens. They're private. So the regulations it's at a high degree of abstraction. It is unconstitutional to apply regulations in an arbitrary and capricious manner because that violates due process. I'll wave through all that. Insurance contracts are contracts, and so as long as they have a reasonable interpretation of their contract, then it's perfectly fair for them to act arbitrarily under that contract. Unfortunately or not, and it's not just insurance companies, it's any contract. Like if you have a month-to-month, well, maybe not in Colorado, y'all are a little weird down here with your rental laws, but if you have a month-to-month lease and your landlord says you're out at the end of the month, you're out at the end of the month. You can be arbitrary and capricious in private contracts as long as you are at least you're not at least violating the contract itself. Governments don't have that kind of a contractual relationship. It's a regulatory relationship, so they can't say, we're not going to give you an auto title because we don't like the fact that you're trying to title it in the name of an LLC. That might be an example. But they, if that happens to you, you could sue for arbitrary and capricious enforcement of regulation. So yes, you have the right concept, but it doesn't apply as neatly to a private context.
One thing, we are UL certified.
Oh, excellent. Thank you.
So this is an insurance question, and I know it's probably gonna be a long time. You talked about insurance companies being slow. When are they gonna put it on their balance sheet to lower the premiums? They make all this stuff work. How long do you think that'll be?
Win 200K.
We're asking our company to do it. We're like, we had the first office in the metaverse. We issued a certificate of insurance on the blockchain. We have an office, we're forward leaning. We're saying broker of the future. We're like, come on, IMA, put your money where your mouth is. Let's do this. So I was talking to someone in our treasury department a couple weeks ago, and it's a work in progress for sure, but seeing other companies do it, again, the first mover thing, I'm like, good for you. Let's continue to push this forward. And I don't know how many others will get on board, but we're hoping to be the first.
Awesome. Have you ever asked them the question what they get a better return on than Bitcoin over the last 10 years?
As the
I agree with you.
for
Have you asked that question, I guess?
No, not specifically. I have not, but I will take that as a follow-up. Thank you very much.
as a CFO for a company that has Bitcoin primarily on their balance sheet, highly recommend.
Okay, I think that should be about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.